I didn't know what to do and I froze. My water broke first. That was the first sign of labor. And in my class that I took, they said, "Oh, it's not going to happen that way. Your water will break way later into pregnancy." And so my type A personality and my perfectionism and all of these things that it was like very rigid, I was good at taking tests and like good at passing things and like da 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 da. And all of a sudden it was like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Like I vividly remember saying, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And I couldn't get out of that. I was just stuck in this, loop mentally that I just kept on. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to snap out of it. I just kept on like thinking, this isn't what I want. This isn't what's supposed to happen.
I
And so,
prepared myself for this. This isn't
yeah,
happening.
yeah. So
My
now what?
preparations end here. And it's a very scary place to be in life,
Yeah.
in birth, in any situation. Help Me See is a podcast dedicated to the art of seeing. It's a space for the restless visionary with an insatiable desire to create the life and work you're meant for. My name is Bianca Mora, and I'm a photographic artist, a mother, and a coach who's transformed my fear of loss into power, art, and philosophy. One of the scariest quotes I never want to say is, "I wish I knew at the time." But I truly believe that we have the innate ability to bring our wise 2020 hindsight to our now. You can deeply experience your nostalgia now while it's actually happening with no regrets. All you have to do is see. In this show, we laugh, we cry, we get inspired, we overshare. We have life-changing conversations around making meaning, self-discovery, and shedding all of the BS layers in order to reconnect to our own sacred vision. Seeing yourself is an essential key to living powerfully. You are the vessel, the lens that filters absolutely everything in your life. What are you filtering for? Whether it be conversations with fellow artists and visionaries or my solo audio journal style introspective ramblings, each episode is meant to feel like an exhale, an unraveling of truth, a moment for you to be able to put your finger on something that you haven't been able to for far too long. Come exactly as you are. It's perfect. Honor your instincts. Let's uncover some of the most important things in our lives, which all too often can slip out from our view. Let's commit to seeing and consciously creating what only you can in your one and only life. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Help Me See. Today on the show, we have a special guest. Her name is Sarah Marie Bilger, and she is an incredible mama of two that has been working in engineering for quite some time now. It's what she went to school for, and then the pandemic hit. During that unexpected time and having unexpected space, Sarah was able to dive into some other interests and discover some passions, and really carried them with her through the pandemic, through going back into the office. And now, because of that, she has actually ended up leaving her full-time job as an engineer and is now a full-time mama and full-time doula, pursuing the work that lights her up. What I think is so interesting and important about Sarah's story is that she really, really loved and enjoyed her job as an engineer. This is not a story of someone who was living life so discontent and miserable, and then pandemic hit, and finally she was able to XYZ. It's so important to listen to Sarah's story because it's what's possible when you really lean in to your own whisper. I find oftentimes it's easier to spot and to take action when something feels bad and wrong. But her job did not feel bad. It did not feel wrong. She just found something that she felt deeper. She felt more lit up by. And I think that honoring that wisdom and that whisper of your innermost desires is one of the most important and precious things you can do for yourself in your life. Our conversation starts out very casually because I just hit record before we're ready to start talking about whatever the conversation is for the podcast. And she's sharing how she's expanding on this way of being outside of work and how she's currently taking the leap and buying a lake house. And uh, after hearing this conversation, I'm sure you'll truly be able to feel her innate curiosity and openness and love for life and everything that she encounters. Really, Sarah is a huge inspiration, and I'm so happy to bring her to you on the show. If you want to learn more about Sarah, check out the show notes where you can get into her world. She also has a podcast called Entering Motherhood. You can go find her there. Without further ado, here is Sarah.
Okay.
Whoa.
Oh, is the house nearby or?
So yeah, so we're still staying in our current house, and we're
Uh,
getting a second property out by a lake.
oh
So
my gosh, that's amazing.
we're super excited. Like we were kind of like we wanted a mountain house or a lake house or something along those lines. And so we've been looking and we found this cute little 2-bedroom, like blue cottage kind of vibe
Oh my God.
home.
Oh my
And
God.
it has like a private pond in the backyard and it's so dreamy.
Like, how do you even process so many huge changes at once? Oh my
I
God.
feel like that's how it goes though. Like my husband
Ooh,
says I can never do like one thing at a time.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, we're overhauling the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
It is. It's very exciting, but we're also like, how is it all going to work out? But also like, oh, it's got to work out.
It'll work out. Don't be no choice for it to work out. Oh man. Well, congratulations. That's incredible.
Thanks.
Almost sitting down. Okay. Yeah, I very last minute. I mean, like a week before, not even a full week, decided to keep my my 5-year-old home from daycare for the summer in an effort
Mm-hmm.
to, I was like, I'm already with the 3-year-old full time. And our whole thing is like, we can't afford to send them both home. Like, I certainly can save for the summer when I'm already home with one and then have at least a few months saved up going into fall. So now I'm with both of them all day, every
Yep.
day. And it's kind
Yep.
of like, well, what am I going to do? Like, not do any work ever? So now it's just like, well, I just have to be more distraction and, you know, whatever. But
Yep. Yep. That's what I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea what stay-at-home mom life is going to be like, and I'm still going to be doing my doula work and everything like that, but I don't know.
oh my goodness.
It's gonna be fun. And then our oldest will be 5 and she'll start kindergarten. So it's really like for the summer, both of them. And then she'll start school. So
That's really the best timing. You're sliding in under the buzzer. You know what I mean? Of
uh-huh.
your That's so great.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, I guess I mean like motherhood, of course. I can go into whatever.
Well, I really love when you first messaged me back when I posted that I'm sick of talking to myself on the podcast.
You said something around, it was like creating or life or artistry. I don't know, something about creatorship or artistry or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think what's so interesting and what's so totally relevant to what's going on for you right now. Oh boy, you're like, wow, what did I get myself into? Now that you're
No,
like
I love
witnessing me in
it.
full life right now. I usually don't have them around for podcasts, but I have the last. Yes, that is so cool, dude. Um, Listen, maybe you can write down all the facts that you think to tell me? Because right now mommy's gonna be on talking, okay, buddy? They're so cute. So you know what I think is so interesting to talk about, especially in the season that you're in right now, like with so much change afoot. Um, this idea of creating life birth, creating life, a life, like whatever the hell that means, and recreating it, not being beholden to the life that you've already committed to or the blueprint that you've seen elsewhere. You know what I mean? I feel
Mhm.
like you're totally going, and now I'm home full time, and now we have a lake house, and now we, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Like, I mean, it's kind of, having a vision and figuring out like what do you want that to look like? And then what are the steps and what's that journey of getting there? And sometimes like I said, I have no idea how it's gonna work out or what it's gonna be like. And we've never had both kids home full time with me. They've always been in daycare unless I was on maternity leave. So it's like a lot of change, but I'm super excited for it because it's something, like, it's a change that I want and a change that I decided to have and have been planning for, as opposed to, like where it's not a change that happened that was unexpected or, not planned.
But you know what I think is so interesting is that it's, and you said like when you have your vision, you go, oftentimes you, especially because what we're doing is so unique to us, the vision didn't exist before it like alchemized in us, right? Like the same thing with our babies, right? Like we don't see, it's all inside. You don't see what's going on, but you're moving like with this like deep instinct and intention and intuitiveness, whatever, intuition.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what does that look like? Maybe if you could talk about how that has shown up for you. So first, let's introduce you.
Oh yeah.
20
That.
minutes in. Sarah, and like the work that you do, and maybe just a little background about the transition you're in right now and the work you're in before and what you're doing now, and then we can like roll deeper into this conversation we've just stumbled upon.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am Sarah Marie Bilger. I am a mom and I have been doing engineering pretty much since I graduated from college. That's what I went to school for. That's what I studied. That's what I have been doing. And then I had children and I entered motherhood and my whole life shifted and changed. And I was like, what do I want to be doing? Is this what I want to be doing? Do I want to, be in an office day in and day out, send my kids to daycare, only see them for a little bit of time before bedtime? And then, obviously as they get older, things like change and adjust, but it just wasn't aligned with me anymore. And it wasn't what I thought I was meant to be doing. And so I really started this journey of like self-exploration and figuring out like what I was passionate about and what really lit me up and how I can choose what I love and bring that into something that can bring in income, really kind of like be passion driven and more aligned with the life that we were creating and going forward with. And so after a long like trial and error of many different things. I have been a doula now for, I guess my first birth was almost like 4 or 5 years ago, but I really kind of like stepped into it and decided that's what I'm doing more so 2 years ago. And now this week, exactly, I'm leaving my engineering job because I have picked up in clients and really kind of expanded on what's possible. And so kids are coming out of daycare. I'm stay-at-home mom slash doula. And it's all changing, but it's been a process.
And you have your own podcast as well, right?
Yep. Yep. And I also started entering motherhood. I guess that was about maybe 3.5 years ago. It'll be 4 years in January. So it's it's been a wild ride, but I love it.
So this idea of kind of listening to or seeing the feeling before actually the thing, or the specificity around what it might look like, aka coming home full time and pulling the kid out of daycare and having two kids at home, and figuring all of this out, which you still actually, you're like, what will it look like? I'm not sure because I haven't been in it yet. But this idea of um taking action on our intuition, and I'm sure that you could speak to it in ways that weave in what that looks like in birth and pregnancy, because you're with women on that journey, you've been on that journey yourself. Just, yeah, whatever you want to speak to on that, like how it's playing out in your life right now and what you see in the birth space.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly to that. I mean, most of the time, first time parents, even, second time, third time, however many kids they're having, they're always like, what is it going to be like? What's going to happen? Like, I don't know what I don't know. And, even just, I had two births literally this past week, which is very unusual, but one mom was late and then the other one went early. So it all kind of meshed in like literally the same time frame. But, a lot of them, they're just like, well, what's going to happen? Or like, what does this feel like? What does that feel like? How am I going to know? And sometimes you'll hear like, oh, like you'll just know, like if you start having contractions, you'll just know. And so for most of us, maybe that's true, but for other people, it could be like, I'm not sure. Is this real? Is this, labor? It's a lot of like, I always say, typically it's like this, but I've seen this happen. I've seen that happen. It's like typically you'll dilate, maybe a centimeter every hour, but I've seen people progress super quickly. So like, don't take cervical checks like for what it is. It's just like, how are you feeling and what's going on? And so it's really just like the unpredictability of it, but knowing that like, you're going to get a baby in the end. And, for this, like, it's just kind of, knowing that like there's going to be some sort of outcome, there's going to be, changes, but I see it with excitement rather than afraid. Like, I'm like, I can always go back to engineering. I know what that's like. I can always go to my quote unquote safety net of what that's like. But I would be like kicking myself if I never tried to go another direction. I don't want to. I hear so many stories of people like, oh, like I wish I would have done this when I was younger, or like, oh yeah, like I just did this for my job and then now I'm retired and I'm finding hobbies or passions and this and that. And it's like, I don't want to wait to do that. And I want to, be able to explore different options and opportunities because, our kids grow up fast and they're already, I mean, I have an almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm excited to just spend more time with them.
Yeah, it's so funny, like hearing you talk about how you talk your clients through like all of these variables and how they're looking to you for answers. And you're like, if I'm doing my job responsibly, I can't give you an answer. like, I wish I could tell you this is exactly how it's going to be, but also not really, because where's the magic in that? But also, it's not realistic to expect like the plan to go as planned in birth slash in life. Um, can you go back a little bit with your own birth? Um, and I'm assuming your interest in becoming a doula happened afterwards, the way you're talking. So like
Yeah.
what did that look like for you? What was your experience in the birth space look like as you were moving through it as a first time mom? And then as you decided to dive into it on that caregiver side?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was, corporate working person to the T. I was type A, very like, we're going to have a baby and it's all just going to work in the mix somehow. Like, we'll just send them off to daycare. I'll keep working. It is what it is. And, we're going to be a family. And while, yes, that happened, it was also like, I don't have that drive for this corporate environment as much anymore. I have, I'm torn between wanting to be with my baby and wanting to do a good job at work. And when I'm at work, I'm thinking of her. And, when I'm with her, I'm like, am I doing enough at work? Am I being a good enough employee? Am I, all of these things, like you're really kind of finding that balance. And while I was able to find that balance and I was able to like thrive in that environment and be okay with it, it still just didn't feel aligned. And also what really like led me to doula work was Rosie, our oldest, our first, she was born through an unplanned cesarean. I was kind of like, hey, we're going to have this unmedicated birth. Everything's going to go perfect and it's going to be great. And it just didn't go that way. And so I was really thrown off and kind of confused at like, well, like why? Like I took the birth class, I read the books, like why didn't it happen? And I think there was really just this disconnect between my body and my emotions and the flowing through it and the really kind of feeling what birth can be. And what, it's not just, you can't just read a book and you're going to birth a baby. Like, again, like for some people, sure, like you can just walk into the hospital, sneeze out your baby, and then everything's fine. But for most of us, it really is like this very intentional, deep work that comes with how you want to birth your baby and what that looks like. Because if you don't have a clear set vision, it will just happen to you. And there might be some things that later on you're, not, I don't want to like excited about, like you don't look back on it with such joy that you could. There's like little bits and pieces that you maybe don't remember or really didn't feel okay with, but you didn't know what all your options were. You didn't know what decisions to make. And so I really feel like it's just like informing parents of all the different decisions that there are, and seeing like what's possible and what's really practical for what they're looking for. But with my experience, it was just kind of like, okay, there has to be something else that I'm missing. And I very much like wanted to look more into it. So I was talking to midwives in the area and other birth workers and things like that. And then I had my son, and he was completely unmedicated. He was a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, like there's really something to this. And like now it wasn't only what I was like talking and like preaching, I physically went through it myself. So I felt so much more validated in the things that I was like learning about and hearing and really kind of like bringing into what I was like telling other people. So it's really just been, I don't know, like a journey and really kind of like uncovering what I like about it. And I just feel like I'm so much more meant to do this. And like I also do postpartum care. I'm caring for twins right now. And like I come over and the mom's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like they're not sleeping. Help. And within like a few minutes, like I have them both like down and content. And I don't know. I love to snuggle babies. I love to like help moms and families overall, but just give them like tips and tricks of how to really just go through it, because I feel like it comes very natural for me. And I know that's not the case for a lot of people.
It sounds like a big part of what you do is centered around uncovering choice. Just choice, 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 awareness, because sometimes maybe the choice you're making is not exactly the choice that will for sure be available to you in that moment. But uncovering choice so that you can make the most informed decision for yourself. And like, of course, this is a microcosm for life. And right
Yeah.
now, you're doing this like in uncharted territory yourself. And also, I think it was interesting that you said the first time around was the tough one, right? Where things didn't go as planned. You're like, what the fuck? And then the second time you're like, this is awesome. I mean, obviously there was a lot of differences, but can you isolate like the key variables that changed, that unlocked that new experience for you?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of mindset, and it's a lot of really kind of asking yourself those hard questions, or saying like, what do you really want it to look like? And how are we taking steps to get there? Like with my first, I was just kind of like, I heard the idea of unmedicated birth, and I heard that, you can just like go into the hospital and that can happen. And I just sort of like said, okay, yeah, like that's going to be me. Like I'm going to be fine. And, I'll be able to get through any feelings that I have. And so she was asynclitic, which is kind of like coming out sideways, like her head was a little tilt. And she was positioned like forward facing instead of like facing towards the back. So it was like very poor positioning and a lot of pressure early on, a lot of just different sensations that are not that great. And I I didn't know what to do and I froze. I kept on saying like, this isn't like my water broke first. That was like the first sign of labor, just my water breaking. And in my class that I took, they said, oh, it's not going to happen that way. Your water will break way later into pregnancy. And so my like type A personality and like my perfectionism and all of these things that it was like very rigid, like, I was good at taking tests and like good at passing things and like da 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 da. And all of a sudden it was like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Like I vividly remember saying like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And I couldn't get out of that. I was just stuck in this, loop mentally that I just kept on. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to snap out of it. I just kept on like thinking, this isn't what I want. This isn't, what's supposed to happen.
I
And so,
prepared myself for this. This isn't
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
There's
So
my
now what?
preparations end here. And like, and it's a very, it's a very scary place to be in life,
Yeah,
in birth, in any situation.
yeah.
So how, like, did you break out of that? Was that kind of with you the whole birth? And how do you draw on that now in life as you are continuing to break out of,
Yeah.
what you might have
Yeah.
been prepared for?
Yeah. I mean, I think like, in some situations in life, like if it's not the way you want or it's not the way like, you plan for this and that, you might be able to like pivot and you have a little bit more time and you can kind of like reevaluate and think. With birth, there isn't any time. Like there is, but there isn't. It's kind of like, look, like baby's coming. You're having contractions. There's stuff going on. Like you literally have to just snap out of it right now and figure out what plan B is, or you're just going to be stuck in this loop. And like, yes, in life, like, I mean, like that happens. Like people get stuck in like, I didn't want to be here. I didn't want my life to look like this. And you'll stay exactly where you are because you can't pivot out of that. And if there's not somebody, they're able to be like, hey, look, like, we can work through this and like we can get out of this, like, let's go. And also, you need to be willing to say, like, yeah, you're right, I can. And like, let's go, like, let's figure out another way. Like, I had a doula for my first, and like she was trying to redirect a little bit. And I just kept on saying, like, nope, nope, I don't want like I was just, stubborn and stuck. And so I really feel like working on mindset and figuring out a plan B. If all of a sudden they start saying, like, hey, this is happening with baby, like, we really feel like you need to go for a cesarean, you have to be ready and say, like, okay, like, is that my only option? And like, if that is the route that we're going, I want this, that, and that. Like, knowing just like what your options are, even if the plan goes worst case scenario. How can we pivot in that? And it's tough to like think of all those things. Like I don't expect people to like dwell on worst case scenarios for life, for birth, whatever, but just like having the, I mean, like with like we're getting a separate second property, we're having a lake house, like we're going to be doing construction and renovations and stuff like that. So like worst case scenario, we find something, it's like a money pit, it's all of these things. And it's like, but we know that and we know what we're getting into. And so we're fine with that and we know what our options are. I think in so many different situations, it really just helps you feel better about making that decision when you know what could go wrong or what could happen.
And
And you
I
feel
think
more prepared.
that even more than having the doom and gloom list memorized, which I've memorized plenty of my day, but even more so than that, it seems that being really rooted into what feels good and right for you. Like, so no matter what unexpected situation can come your way, like you kind of know how to carry yourself through or how to at least ground yourself into like, okay, if I have to get a cesarean, like, I need this music playing. I need this, like, I know the ways in which to support myself. If this is a money pit and this is happening, like, one, we need to make jokes out of it, or otherwise I will cry and cry and cry. Or, just from the most rudimentary to the
Right.
most tense, serious ways to support yourself. And Yeah, I think about my own birth, which I don't, you know what, as you're talking about this, I think it's very interesting that I don't remember a lot of the details of my own birth. And I think like it was a very traumatic experience for me. My first one, like from start to postpartum, I had like really unexpected postpartum anxiety and depression, like really badly. I had mastitis. I was in labor for like 3 days. It was so painful. I didn't even know I could move, or I was too scared to even move, to the point where when I had my second kid and I was dosed with Pitocin because he none of my kids want to leave my body. I didn't have a doula either time, which it wasn't even something I thought of. Like wasn't even in my wasn't like I said no to it, just didn't even think about having it, which makes me a little sad. But I remember being like, wow, I am very intolerant of pain. I will want to cry over a paper cut. And the moving and the bouncing on the ball felt so much better. I almost thought I could do it unmedicated. And I was like, "Oh my god." I was laying horizontal for days in excruciating pain. And of course, at a certain point, I couldn't, move anyway after a certain point, but still, I was like, I had no idea it wouldn't hurt as bad. Take that comment and apply it to life and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is kind of like sometimes you shock yourself at like, oh, I mean, my one client this past week, like she knew for sure she wanted the epidural. That was like part of the plan. She just didn't know like when it was going to happen, things like that. But like afterwards, she was like, oh, like I knew it was going to be a big needle. Like, I was a little bit scared, but like it really wasn't that bad. And like it was like all this like expectation and all of this hype of what it could be like, that you're kind of making yourself worry so much more than the reality of like how it's going to be. We have this trampoline park near us that we've gone to, and it has like a high jump into that one of those. It's not a trampoline, but it's like a big blow up floaty thing. And so like you jump off the high jump and like land on the pad, and here I am like in my 30s deciding that like I'm going to do it because it was scary. Like it seemed like that's really high up, and I'm up there and I'm sweating, and it was maybe like a 10-foot drop. And I just jumped and I did it. And I was like, oh, that was not that bad at all. And like my husband took a video, and it just looked so much more simple than like when I was up at the top of there, like sweating and freaking out. And then I was like, I could do it again. And again, once you kind of break that seal and you do the hard thing, it's like, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad.
Your threshold increases.
Yeah.
You know what else it makes me think of? It makes me think of from baby number one to baby number two. Baby number two was like, what was our problem? like, like of course, like all respect given, like of course you don't have any context. But like I think when I had my second one, I was like, this is so much more manageable than when they're mobile. Like, so it's just so interesting and funny how it's all relative and everyone's experience is so independent and so unique and in their own, but also how vastly it changes.
Yeah.
So, with what you're doing now in your life, what would you say makes you most excited and makes you most nervous? And how do you find yourself navigating that?
Yeah. I think, and it's funny because like this is like a conversation that I had with my daughter recently, because we were talking between excitement and nervousness, and like those two feelings kind of like overlapping and intertwining. So like I'm really excited to get this lake house, but I'm also like very nervous what that's going to entail. So it's understanding like, okay, like is my nervousness actually just excitement because it's sort of like new and I don't know what to expect. And so being able to like flip the script and all these things that you might be nervous about, and say, okay, actually could it be excitement? And how can we like look at it in that perspective? But like again, like having my kids stay home full time, like I hear stories of people that are stay-at-home moms, and I know that there's challenges that come with it just as much as like there's challenges of working moms and things like that. And I'm super excited to see what that switch is going to be like, and understand, having them home all of the time, because on the weekends, sure, I'm with them all the time and I can tolerate them and everything's great. But, are they going to take naps? Or are there going to be more tantrums? Are we going to get, stuck in the house and need to go out somewhere? Or are we always going to be out somewhere? And I think it's just processing that and not knowing what it's going to be like, but being okay with it. Because up until this point, like everything's worked out fine. So
And and it's not really a, a coincidence. I feel like everything will be okay when we are like tethered to like acting in our truth and in our alignment, right? So it's not even like there's a right or wrong answer. There isn't, like, in anything at all. Because even if you choose, even if, I think the most quote unquote obvious wrong thing you could do is choose something you knew in your gut. You know, those
Mhm.
moments where you choose something that you know in your gut's not right. But even in that, it's like whatever comes out of that is so important. It's so important. And it's important not only for whatever lesson learned, but like even if it's so important to somatically like feel in your body and respect your instinct and be like, I felt that. I knew it. I knew it. So it's like, and not favoring that like emphasis on the shame of like, I didn't listen to myself, but like, okay, now I have even more awareness about like what it feels like as a no in my body and what it feels like as a yes in my body.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is that alignment and really tuning into that, because yeah, I guess I am nervous about dropping the engineering part of me. And like I say, like I'm always going to be an engineer. I'm always going to have that mindset. I'm always going to have like the skill set to be able to do that. I love problem solving. I love analyzing different things in that aspect, but I'm not going to have that specific job title, that specific role that I'm practicing in a profession. But I mean, I use that same mindset when it comes to my clients for birth. I use that same, mindset when I'm playing with my kids. And it's probably just my own thinking, what people are gonna think. But I don't know like how some family and friends will perceive it, or if they'll even notice or recognize. I think like one time one of my cousins thought I was just like staying at home with the kids and like didn't even realize that I worked anymore. And like, it's stuff like that. Like you don't typically stay up to date. I mean, I have a lot of cousins. My mom was one of 10. And so on my mom's side, I have at least 30 cousins. And so to have to
Holy shit.
like I don't even know what all of their professions are all of the time. If they're like changing different jobs or doing something differently, and like we don't, keep an Excel spreadsheet of what everybody's doing in like every moment. So I think you put these expectations on yourself of, oh, what are they going to think of me, or how are they going to perceive this, or what's going to happen. And most of the time we're all just in our own lives and navigating what's going on in our own personal like space and bubble, that if somebody else does something, and especially if it's truly aligned with where they want to go and what they want to do, then they're like, heck yeah, like I'm so proud of you, I'm so excited for you, that's really cool. I think it's really more concern when somebody's thinking about you in that kind of aspect. Let's say I was like, oh, I have to, go take this job, or I have to leave, or I have to go somewhere, I have to do something that I'm not necessarily happy about, or I lost my job, I really liked my job. I think it's more so like people are concerned for your well-being more so than they're judging you or thinking about you in like a negative aspect.
So what I love so much about what you're saying is I think about how important it is to call out that it's not like there was this grand, juicy story of like, I was miserable. I hated my job. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like that's the narrative you hear most. And I think that there's something so beautiful about like listening to yourself so intimately that you're like, not only am I not miserable, but I like this part of my personality. I like this mindset. I like the way my brain works. It's very satisfying for me to use my skill set in this way and, work in this way. And making that choice into the unknown out of that intuition rather than out of a more black and white, like, clearly unhappy. This is clearly harming a lot of things. It's just like, no, I just have this pull towards something that is so ambiguous, but also like clear in a weird way. And despite what it might seem like, or if you hadn't seen one of your 30 cousins do something similar, well, that is a lot of cousins. I don't know. I wonder if you had witnessed that before. I don't know. I just wanted to call that out because I feel like a lot of times we hear these stories about stopping work to go home. It's a very volatile thing, right? It's very much like I was miserable. I knew it was so wrong, but that's not the case for you here. And it's beautiful that you're like, and I could always go back and blah 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 blah. So
Yeah.
if you want to speak a little bit more to what that felt like moving through that, like if there was
Yeah.
waffling and like, but I'm happy, if it ain't broke, should I not fix it?
Mhm.
Like,
Exactly that. I mean, yeah, I could, I could contently be doing engineering work until I retire and go about my days and live that life and be totally fine with it. I mean, like I said, like that's what I went to school with. I was very much like, oh, you're good at, math and science, like go into this. I'm good at it. Like I can sit at my computer and I can crank out all these like spreadsheets and do all these calculations and get into design of everything. But like, it just felt like, okay, but what else is there out there? What else can I kind of like explore? And what would I think looking back if I was retiring? Like, it would have been cool to try this, or like it would have been different to, explore this other option. And part of it is like, I'm like, am I kind of nuts for, leaving this really well-paying job that I spent like all this time going to school for? And, you know, I feel fine doing just to explore that passion and something that lights me up. And, I think a lot of times like, work is work and work should be hard. And you do your work and you get it done, and then you can have fun on the weekend. And the weekends and nights and stuff are for like your hobbies and the things that you want to do and all that. And I was like, but I see other people that are doing what they love. Like, not that I didn't, you know, like hate engineering or anything, but I wouldn't say it was like my passion or and a love of like, like I'm gonna spend my weekends like doing load calcs. Like it's just like I had other interests and hobbies and things like that. And with starting the podcast and talking to other people and hearing that, they were in this like dead end job and they had to find something else, or they knew that they had to kind of step into something else and they found it. I was kind of like, okay, so I can, get paid to do something that lights me up and I really feel aligned with, and I'm also like naturally good at. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I always saw that as being part of the equation. And now I get to really put that forefront. And I mean, like I lost my mom when I was really young, and then I lost my stepmom. And so I think like those two experiences really have also kind of put me in this position of not like the, again, worst case scenario, what if it happens to me? But I don't want to look back on my life and not do the things with my kids that I wish I would have had more time for. Or if I'm telling them, chase your dreams, do what you love, if I'm not also amplifying that and doing it myself, then, again, not that I am worried about what they're going to think of me, but I want to be that example of like, it is possible. You can go into a corporate career, you can make that your thing, and you can absolutely do that. But you also can, tap into different creative outlets and go into birth work or whatever it might be, and still get a very similar outcome of like how your life is supposed to pan out.
how it's supposed to pan out. This reminds me of, so Sarah and I, we did this very mini retreat one time together, and I think about like all the big questions that kind of came up, and like, but what's the point? But and for what? And what is the bigger picture? And what are we really saying here? And um, yeah, it's just those social norms of how what's typical and traditional in a life and what's quote unquote responsible. And then there are those moments where I've I've said yes to something or said no to something that was so outlandish to me. Those moments where I felt like on paper, I look insane. And also those moments where I felt like I had the thought I should feel scared right now and I don't. What is wrong with me? And it's like, but isn't that the isn't that intuition? Like it's like, wow, this by all accounts, by everything I've seen and by all the loved ones coming to me unfiltered, this doesn't seem like it makes sense, and yet I feel very still about it. You mentioned you hit on something earlier around like, am I just nervous or am I excited? I think oftentimes for me, it can feel confusing of, is this anxiety? Am I scared or is this like good, like comfort zone, getting out of my comfort zone? And I think that someone once explained it to me as like this, it's like that frantic feeling of scarcity, like all of the but what ifs are fueling it versus the talking about like what ifs in a possibility way. Anyway, so I feel like those distinctions are quite confusing, but also very telling. Right? It's like if I'm in my nervous system, not scared of this, but I think that it looks insane, probably my gut. Like, and also, there can be things that are, really beautiful that your nervous system is like horrified for, like doing a big talk on stage or whatever. And, there's going to be so much learning on the other side of it. Um, yeah, I don't know. And I feel like that relates to birth too. I feel like everything relates to birth.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels in yeah, like different aspects of our life, like in mothering, in business, in, birthing ability and things like that. And like obviously like there's going to be things that happen that are completely out of your control. And again, it's just, how are you going to cope with that? And like how are you going to react from it? And it's a lot of just like saying like, is that how you want to react? Like I think I get stuck in this conversation of people are like, oh, well, I'm this way. And so like I can't change and it is what it is. And it's like, but I feel like you could if you wanted to. Like they'll be like, oh, like, I'm stuck in this job or I have to do this. I would love to be able to explore something different or like that sounds like so exciting, but like I would never or I've been getting a lot of like if I didn't do this job that I'm doing right now, I have no idea what I would do. Like it's like they haven't even explored what other possibilities there is out there or what they would enjoy. And I think we are kind of thrown in this loop of like, grade school, high school, college, and you're like just on this trajectory, on this path for like one specific thing. And while that's great and it really helps us like specialize in different aspects and really like go towards what we want, it doesn't allow for variation and it doesn't allow us to really kind of like say like, well, but what if I tried this? And like maybe that could be another option. You're just sort of stuck on this trajectory of, a path and you don't even take time to say like, what else is it that I want to do? And I think like I really had to intentionally step back and ask myself those questions and really kind of see like, what does get me excited? What do I feel more aligned with? What could I, go into and feel okay with, doing day in and day out? And like, what does that day look like? And yeah, I think it's just sometimes our lives are so full that we don't have the capacity to really take the space needed to ask ourselves those questions.
And where did you find the space to find that capacity? Like what was the thing that helped you kind of like take a step back and look at that hamster wheel and be like, I don't know.
Yeah. I really feel like so COVID hit and I got put on furlough. And I was probably on furlough for a good like 2 months, and we still had the kids in daycare because we didn't want to lose our spot in daycare. We didn't know when I was going to go back, if I was going to go back, like what that was looking like. It was very vague, very up in the air. So like I literally was home by myself majority of the time. Like sometimes I would keep the kids home, but like most of the time I was just like sending them. So I was like going out for coffee with people and like going out to like different places and like listening to podcasts and like reading different things and like all of this stuff. And I really just kind of like tapped into like all these different aspects. And I think like in that time, I grew as an individual of like really understanding like, okay, like there is space to do this. And then when I started back up at work again, I made sure that I prioritized my time to like continuously be tapping into that and like making that part of my lifestyle.
Isn't that so interesting that like it's like the same idea of like you can go your whole life and all of a sudden meet someone that becomes the most important person in your life. It's like you
Mhm.
went so long and then all of a sudden you just become aware of this thing, whether it's an aspect of yourself or something you didn't know existed or a possibility or whatever, and then it becomes something that's like integrated like in your day to day. What did that
Yeah.
look like as you had to make room for, I mean, work, adjust back to work? Like, was it podcast? Was it like, what was it? And how did you kind of assimilate this new component of you in your new normal?
Yeah, after I got back off of furlough, I had switched companies and I had gone like 100% remote. And so I was at home all the time. So, like my lunch break, I could, do really whatever I wanted and I wasn't commuting and I wasn't, worrying about like getting all dressed for the office and things like that. So I got a lot of that time in a way like back. Like my morning commute was sitting in my living room drinking a cup of coffee listening to a podcast. And I think it's just like again, it's restructuring. And like I think when people say like, oh, like I don't have time for that, or like, oh, like I don't know how I could make time for that, it's like, okay, you have to prioritize it. It's not all going to be New Year's resolutions and things like that. People are super ambitious and they're like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. It's adding in little things at the capacity that you can. And right now I'm very, very full because I'm still full time. I had those 2 births this week. And I'm also doing overnight postpartum care. So, like, essentially, I have been doing like 80 hours of work and then additionally, who knows what. So, it's just like it's there. It's just you have to prioritize it and then stick with it if that's what you want.
Sarah said that with a smile on her face, like a drunk smile. She was just like, I'm just doing it. Like it looked like a happy, glowing thing. Yeah, I mean, either way, you're right. Like, no matter what, you're right. If you're like, I just don't have time for it, it's because you don't, because you won't make time when that's the thing. And it sounds so annoying and you just want to like backhand me, but it's true. It is so true. And I think about COVID and how we all of a sudden everyone was given permission to sit it out if they got that positive test for a week, and things that we couldn't possibly call out or couldn't possibly not go, or was it's like whether it's etiquette or like a rule for attendance for the amount of sick days we get, which can we talk about how ridiculous that is, whatever, all of a sudden because the whole world was on the same page and it was like this above the table requirement, then there goes permission. It's magic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's the same, when my kids would get sick and I'm working and everything, like I have the flexibility and I would say, I guess, like the luxury of like being at home that if they were sick, they would literally just be out in the living room on the couch watching some TV or like resting. And I would be able to check in on them and stuff like that. If I had to go into the office, maybe it was just like I took like a complete sick day, which again, I could have done that even being at home, but it's that permission that like, are we giving ourselves that, or who are we really afraid to ask for it from? And a lot of the times, if you just like open up that communication, let's say you want to be able to have more time to prioritize for yourself, and you are a stay-at-home mom, or, you know, like you're with your kids and stuff like that, who can you really just ask, I need some time just by myself once a month, or, you know, like once a week, however often you can do it. And sometimes you'd be surprised that people would be like, oh, yeah, sure. I didn't know you needed that. Or like, I didn't know that would help you. Um,
You're
and
like,
so.
what? You didn't?
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, like, I know I keep beating myself up right now because, like, I keep on saying I need to work out more and I need to move more and things like that. I feel like I've been so, like, stagnant in my mobility and everything like that. And it's okay. I know that I'll have that time later, and I know that I'll pick back up into it. But I do have a lot of balls that I'm juggling right now and a lot of different things that are like going on. And so I can't beat myself up. You don't want to burn yourself out. You don't want to like max capacity everything. But you can slowly say, like, okay, but I do want to have more time for that. So how can I work on getting there?
Exactly. It's not like shaming yourself into just push more, push more. It's that idea of like 10x is easier than 2x. Like if you think it's impossible, it's not try twice as hard. It's like if it had to be 10x, how would you think about the situation? You have to break your brain out of like the mental model that it's used to, out of the habits, out of the whatever. Like what is the ways in which we can move these puzzle pieces that are maybe seem surreal. You know, you really have to push it that far because we're creatures of habit. Are you kidding me? You go into a same room more than one time, you're going to sit at the same spot in the table.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's really not about that. Like, let's just smash more in and sheer grit and determination, like you said. Oh well, weekends are for play and weekdays for work. It's really breaking your brain out of all of the cycles and taking all those pieces together and be like, wait, how do I want to put this together? And it's not easy because institutions are built around the norm. So of course, like
Mm-hmm.
the typical hours of daycare, the typical hours of school, the typical hours of doctor's offices, like all that stuff. So what we're saying is not like, oh, just do that, like flippantly. But I mean, it's really an intentional choice and an intentional deconstructing of a life in order to build
Mm-hmm.
one that, you know, fills you up more than you thought possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is, like you said, like the deconstructing and the reevaluating. And I mean, this has been a 5-year process for me of like, what do I really want to do and what does it look like? And I have thought about quitting my job and what that might look like. And now, like, it's actually a reality. And it's just not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be all of a sudden. But if you have that desire and then like you continue and you can change your mind, like if you like continue to go for that, and you see maybe you don't like it, maybe you're like, oh, like I want to, you know, try this or do that, like I want to be a runner. You know, let's start running. And then you start running and you're like, this is actually miserable. I'm never going to enjoy it. I'm never going to get better at it. I don't know why I thought this was cool. Like maybe you saw a video or a really cool outfit for running or something, or some new shoes. And like, you're like, yeah, like that looks so cool. And then you're like, nope, never mind. Not my thing. And that's okay. Like, I think it's like allowing ourselves to change and pivot and have that, you know, curiosity and exploration, but not being like, again, stuck in any which way. We can change and we can adjust.
Yeah, it's hard to remember because we love to wrap our identities up with these things. No, but I identify as this type of person. Even if it's something so silly like vanilla over chocolate, or I'm a coffee person, not a tea person. You know, it sounds silly and insignificant, but in a very real way, it stops us from even recognizing something else as an option, as a choice.
Mm,
Um, I was saying on another episode how I was at a restaurant and I'm eating. I have an autoimmune thing and I'm eating for my thyroid now, and I have to ask very annoying questions at restaurants. And I found myself like making fun of myself and being like, "Oh, I'm usually not." It's like, I'm usually not that person. What person? A person that cares about, like, the food they put in their body? What is my why am I defending myself to this waiter who doesn't give a fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so interesting, and the more you become aware of those things, it's not that you're above doing it. It's just that you start seeing it. Like, that's
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because yeah, I have a nut allergy. And so I
Mhm.
probably should, at every single restaurant that I go to,
Mhm.
make them well aware of it. But I'm like, no, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna read through the menu. And if it doesn't say nuts, then I'm just gonna believe that like there's no nuts. But I had a really severe allergic reaction a couple years ago, with that kind of scenario. It was a vegan restaurant. We were on vacation. And I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get the vegan burger." I've had so many vegan burgers in the past, so much vegan cheese, like you name it, and never have had an issue. I know that some places will use nuts, this and that, but it's usually listed and called out. So like I didn't think anything of it. Here I'm like halfway into my burger because we were starving and out all day. And I'm like, there was nuts in this. Like there was absolutely nuts in this. And I started turning bright red. I started getting really itchy. And I went up to them and I was like, "Hey, like just curious, like do you use nuts like in your burger?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, like our cheese is like a house homemade like cashew cheese." And I was like, "Great, I'm having an allergic reaction." And like they were like, "Well, you should have told us." And I think they were like afraid that I was gonna sue them. And I was like, "No, I literally just need like safety, like for myself. Like I need to know for like, reasons of like I'm not hallucinating. I'm actually having an allergic reaction." But I mean, like I was in the ER. I started having a panic attack because now we had children, and I was like, my mom and my stepmom all flowing through my head, like I'm gonna die and leave my children behind, and all of this stuff. But to your point, like I could have just asked, like, what was in the food and avoided that, but I didn't want to inconvenience them and I didn't want to like call more attention to myself of like, "Oh, hey, I'm this maybe if I tell them I have a nut allergy, they're gonna spit in my burger," kind of thing. I didn't want to like be like extra. And while that doesn't happen all the time, it happened in this scenario and it's like for what? For what? Like,
For what?
you
For
know.
what? For what? For what? In every like, that's literally life and death situation you just brought
Yeah.
up. And then there's also, like, what is it? I forget her name is. She did, like, the top 5 regrets of the dying or something. I forget her name, but one of them, like, not caring what people thought. Like, why did I care what anyone thought? Like, no one I overestimated how much someone cared to begin with. And then, and then also didn't get to actually live the way I wanted to live. Um, which honestly, what scares me more than knowing this may sound a little backwards, but what scares me more than knowing I wanna do something and not doing it is not knowing I wanna do something. That there's something about that freaks me out. Like, just not ever realizing that that was an option. I think it's in the same vein
Mhm.
as, like, um, when I think about how photographs help me avoid like, I didn't know how important that was at the time, like, that idea.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like keeping my phone with me and seeing life through photographs always keeps it fresh in me of now, this. But when I think about, like, I didn't think about that as an option for my life. That statement scares the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like that. So,
Yeah.
it's not helpful to also be afraid of everything you don't know, but it really puts at the forefront, what are the ways in which I can constantly be putting in front of me situations that are new or people that are living life differently and how they want to, and not exactly that I'll want to do exactly what they're doing, but just it's such a good muscle exercise or muscle memory to recognize all of the ways in which people innovate and really make life their own. And for you, it's your job full-time now, your job to help people make their births their own. Like, okay, how do you make this experience your own? There's so much out of your control. There's so much that could go wrong and there's so much that could go right. But like, how do we think about the things that we can anticipate and figure out what feels like you in it? And that
Mm.
way we can move in this process in a way that feels good no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like back to how you said, like, you didn't have a doula. I think a lot of people like are still super confused at what a doula is and what a doula does. And people are like, oh, like you deliver babies. And I'm like, no, no. Like I'm not like the OB or the midwife. I don't replace them. You don't, like hire me to like birth your baby. I'm supporting you and I'm informing you of all these different decisions. I'm, excited for you and along the ride for you. And I'm there to answer any questions that you have or, walk through different scenarios. And a lot of times, like I was saying, what is this going to feel like? What is that going to feel like? If a nurse says something and they're doing it day in and day out. So to them, they think, oh, that's enough of an explanation. And so I'm there to kind of be like, oh, actually, they're going to do this or that. They'll be like, oh, we're going to start Pitocin. Okay, is that a pill, a needle, an IV? Like, if you aren't aware of these things, you're just like, okay, do I sit? Do I stand? Where am I? Can I move?
I thought the balloon sounded pleasant. I was like, oh, that makes it the gradual. That sounds like that's very innocent sounding. A balloon. Worst thing of
Mm-hmm.
my life.
Yeah, I mean, like exactly. Or they don't understand. You get the epidural, you're gonna get a catheter because you're not gonna get up to go to the bathroom. Okay, what is that? What does that entail? What is that? What's getting hooked up, and how are things all over? I think it's just,
How it's possible for the epidural to only work on half your body.
right. Yeah. And just all the different like sensations and feelings. Like, I mean, there will be some nurses that are really good at explaining things or like having the time. We were up against like, we weren't sure if she was being sarcastic or what her kind of like personality was. It was very hard to read. And we were just asking about things. She's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, kind of. Are you serious?" We would just we didn't know how to interpret what her personality was. And a lot of these people, maybe your OB or your midwife or whoever, but if you're in a hospital setting, you don't meet the nurses beforehand. You have no idea. And they're the people that are with you majority of the time. So if you don't have a doula with you, you are with a stranger for the most part. Even if you've been with your OB and you've seen them very often, you are with somebody who you have never interacted with before. And if you don't vibe with them, like sure you can ask for like a different nurse, you can rotate, do whatever, but you're kind of just stuck with whatever personality. So like I say if somebody's looking to hire me, I'm like, "Hey, make sure we vibe together. Make sure you're ready for me to get all up in your personal space and be in your very vulnerable situation because if you don't like me, that's not going to be beneficial to you. If you just want me to leave the room, if you don't want to listen to me, if you don't agree with my, viewpoints or perspective on like what's about to happen, then everything that I say is just going to go in one ear and out the other. And that's why some people are like, "Oh, I had a doula and there wasn't a reason for it, or I don't even know why I had one." If you're just kind of doing it because somebody told you to do it and you're just like checking off the list, then it's not going to be as beneficial like for anything. If you're just doing it to do it and you're not really doing it because you specifically want to or that's what decide on, then it's not going to feel in alignment. It's not going to feel right and it's not going to be right for you.
And what's that common thread with all of this? It's just like if you're being the most honest and I'm being the most honest and we're both a match for each other, like how magical will that end up being? Like when you're living in your deepest truth, not just your like, oh, I don't hate it truth. And then you get matched with things that are of the deepest truth for you in life, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's only ever serving everyone around you and yourself to be in your truth, fully in your truth, not in the like, I don't need much, just this. Like, no one, you don't, you're the main character in your life. You're not, why are
Yeah.
you playing small in your own life? You know what I mean? Like, take up space, like, make sure you'll be able to breathe after you eat that burger. Like, it's like, we have to be, and And it's so exhausting, right? Like we have to be our own advocates so hard in so many areas. And it, I mean, even like talk about the medical field, my goodness, like, when you just know something's not right or blah, 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 blah. And it's exhausting. And I know there's so much on our plates as it is. But from what I can glean, I'm not like, I have not arrived, but what I have gleaned is that the more you do it, the easier it becomes. The more you do it, the more your life is more seamlessly set up that way. The more you do it, the more people know what your boundaries are and what to expect from you. So it does become easier over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's like a trend right now saying like who you think you're like emailing and then like who you're actually like emailing. Have you seen that? And it's like they're like professional like headshot photo and stuff. And then it's like, like them like dancing on a table or like doing something like way not aligned with like how their headshots are. And I'm sure like this is something that you can talk to. Like you do a great job of like actually capturing like who that person is in that moment. It's not like this like, very stiff posed image. It's like, no, like this is that person talking to me. Like I remember when you were doing my photos and it was like we were just sitting there having a conversation and like talking and you were like asking me to explain what one of my tattoos were or just like getting me in my element of like my true self versus like okay, pose like this, like have your hair like this, or like let's have this backdrop, or like
And
whatever
isn't
it
that who
might
you want to
be.
be emailing anyway? The person dancing on the table?
Yeah,
Like not the person that's like
right. Like
coiffed in front of a backdrop.
right. Like what makes you think that like that's not who like I mean I try to put like as much of my authentic self out there because like when they're working with me like I'm going to be who I am. And so like I want them to see that so I don't have to put on this fake smile or this type, rigid person. And I feel like with engineering when I had to dress for the office and I had to wear like the pencil skirts or the nice slacks and the the flats and the little heel or something like that. Or like I always felt like I had to like, have my hair done nice and whatnot. Sure, yes, that's a part of me, but like I would not choose to do that on the weekends.
You
I'm
know
not wearing a button up and like
I wonder, it's so interesting. It makes me think that, this whole, what there was something about there's like this mass exiting of like corporate culture. A lot of people are leaving the workplace, obviously, because the effects of COVID and how, oh, now we've seen the light of like, oh, life can be different. Now there's more remote opportunities. But I do wonder how much, I mean, aside from realizing a different passion or whatever, how many more people would stay with corporate and in the workplace if not for like the cultural difference, not just the work, but like this like bullshit, like political expectation. I know someone who they all of COVID were able to work home permanently full time. And then now that, the vaccine's out, they have to be there like 4 days a week. Like, but I'm like, you kept the company alive during COVID, and now knowing you can work at home, but now it's like, nope, we pay for this rented space and optics. We want your butts in the chair. It's like, how does one respect that? And it's not
yeah.
always so black and white, but also at the end of the day, those are what you're making your life decisions on. Like I have to go and act like it's normal for me to wake up and put on a blazer when I just got barfed on by my kid and like was yelling at my poor 5-year-old for taking his time living his life. And I'm like, we're late, we're late, we're late. It's like, who wants to live like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
we could all just feel more at ease in our bodies and our lives. And we can also do a much better job at work to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I am like curious to see how work culture and stuff like that is going to shift and going to change because again, I think it roots back to, well, our parents had to do it that way. There was no work from home kind of thing. And so like the older generations or the people that are still there, they're like, well, I've done it and I've, worked this way. And again, back to the work is hard and, you got to kind of like tough it out for my first birth. Like I had a cesarean. I don't want that on anybody. Like I don't unless like I mean like you want to have a cesarean, like go for it, like all that. But like I don't want somebody to feel as ill-informed and clueless as I was as to what was going to happen and how things happen.
That just reminds me too. It's like, well, I did it, but it's like the world is different now. Like
You don't have to do
like
it.
people, it's like it was glamorous to smoke. We know more about smoking now. It's not the same situation. Even the food that you eat, it's like I ate that. It's like, and also there was
And
a
we all
lot of
turned
less.
out okay, right?
Well, that's debatable. And also the fact that food is different now. Chemicals are different. The way they're making it taste the same, but there's other stuff in it now. It's like it's not apples to apples.
Yeah. It's not apples to apples. It's not all black and white. It's not really rigid anymore. And it doesn't have to be. I think we can look at different options and different possibilities and say, like, okay, sure, traditionally, and like, what even is traditionally? I mean, when we talk about like women working, has it even been like a full century of, women in the workplace? No. And so I think it's just a lot of things change and we have to be like willing to evolve with that change and see different perspectives. And, technology is expanding and doing who knows what. I mean, like even what we're doing right now, like podcasts were not a thing. Like you could not have a career in podcasting. You could not, have a career as a creator and do all of the things that are like existing right now. And so I think like, because that's what I had a conversation with my dad like recently about like before like I made the decision to quit and things like that. And I was like, it's not the trajectory of like where I saw my life going. It's not like, what I had thought of, or I didn't go to school for it. And he's like, well, you didn't even know that it existed. Like you didn't even know that it was a possibility. So like, how were you supposed to know that this is an option or this is what you could have been doing? Because when you were in high school, like I didn't know what a doula was when I was pregnant with my daughter, let alone like going all the way back to high school when you're supposed to have it all figured out and choose a career and go down that path. And so I think it's like just being open to change and understanding that like you're allowed to make those differences and changes and adjustments as you find out about them.
It sounds so cheesy, but it's like you're allowed to be the change. Like,
Yeah.
it's like be the change. Like be there never ever has been and there never will be another you on earth. So the more we can really root in and be the most ourselves we can be, it's the best thing we can do for ourselves and our families and literally the planet. Like it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but I really think that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's fine to be in a space of being in that limbo or not sure. And you can very well, like maybe listening to this and being like, well, I don't really know what I would do, or I feel totally fine. I don't want to change, or I don't want to do anything else. But I mean, if it ever comes up, like you could, or are you saying that because you don't know what your other options are? You don't know what other possibilities could be. But yeah.
Just staying open and being curious. Like, yeah, if there's nothing pulling you, there's nothing pulling you. There's a spot for stillness in everything. There's opportunity.
Yeah.
I think stillness is beautiful. But it's like before how scary it is to think about just not being aware of something that I would have loved or wanted to do. Just being open and being curious to whatever pops up in the awareness, just like you were. And then it popped up and then you held on and you're like, okay, I'm finding
Mhm.
a way to keep this in my everyday life. And now that thing that you held on to is becoming your full life. Isn't that
Yeah,
so cool? What a
it
cool
is. It's
cycle.
really cool. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure and a joy to talk to you about this. I could talk to you forever. And you've been so gracious with my kids, like in the background of this call.
I get
There,
it.
I mean, it's probably never been this that like they're usually like really chill and stay put. And they're showing me now, they're like, no, this isn't going to swing this summer. Hey, hey, Cash, can you save that song for like 5 minutes from now when mommy's not recording a podcast episode?
I can't hear anything if it makes you feel
You
better.
can't?
Nope.
Oh my God. He's singing like a Bob Dylan version of Zach Bryan. Cassie, please, 1 second. I can't believe you can't hear that. That's great news. I mean,
You have a
it feels
great
very
mic.
loud to me, but um, uh, before we let you go, is there anything else that feels like resonant that you want to share? Or is there a way that we can find you? I know you have a podcast. Where do you hang out online? Like, how can people get
Yeah.
more from you?
Yeah. Well, definitely. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find Entering Motherhood. Go over there and we chat about all things like chill, like pregnancy, postpartum, newly motherhood, along those lines. I usually am on Instagram. That is my favorite social media platform at Entering Motherhood. And my website is enteringmotherhood.com. And yeah, that's pretty much like where I hang out, where you can find me and what I talk about there. But I love like connecting with other people. I love having conversations and really kind of like exploring life and what goes on and all the weird inner workings of our brains.
That's something we talked about. It wasn't like it's called entering motherhood, but it's not really specifically entering motherhood. It's like entering mother. It's like all of it.
Yeah.
Entering this new life, this new sense of self, this new way of life, this new possibility, this and then what comes afterwards. I mean, after the baby, then there's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I cannot wait to see this lake house, to see how it all rolls out,
Yeah.
to hear about how, working from home with the littles
Yeah.
is going to be. And we'll have to do like a part two, and maybe the roles will be reversed and you'll be the one walking around your house with your microphone and your
I
laptop.
know. I know. I'm really excited for it all. And I'm super excited to just like be sharing more like back to, being authentic and stuff like that. I feel like I've had to hide a little bit of the behind the scenes work that I do because I have to put on this like forefront of like, I'm a like full-time this. So like if I'm out at coffee with a friend, even if it's like on my lunch break, like I feel so guilty.
I have heard that. I have heard that from many entrepreneurs that are both, part-time entrepreneur, part-time, full-time
Right.
type of situation. And
Yeah.
it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. You know that you put in the hours, but still
Right.
optics. And it's like,
Right. Like you
okay,
couldn't possibly explore some other alternative and, go out on your own passions and
yeah, like what does it get to feel like and look like and be like to not in any way feel this precursor to filter anything?
hmm Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm excited.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Sarah. All the information from Sarah will be in the show notes. And yeah, go over and check out Entering Motherhood. All things Sarah is all things magic for me.
Thank you.
This has been an Awkward Sage production.